Hello everybody, my name's Major Total War, and welcome as we rank the factions on AGO from best to worst when the faction is controlled by the AI. This tier list is going to be slightly different to the previous one we did on the channel, which was sort of my slightly biased opinion. Well, I tried to not be biased, but you get the point I'm trying to make. This is going to be purely on how the AI performs in the campaign map. So how many territories they tend to hold, how they tend to spam armies, things like that. What they do with them armies is a big factor, because it's pointless having loads of banner armies and just sitting outside a region, because you know they all do that sometimes. So this is more like how they tend to do when we watch them on the map. It doesn't really come into effect when they are an ally. It's purely just how they perform in the campaign. I'm drawing this mainly from the experience I've had from AGO and from things I've watched on YouTube and things I've seen on Discord and things like that. So I think I have a decent-ish knowledge of how the AI tends to perform with each of the factions. A big shout out and thank you to Fynn and Pythax for letting me use the image of AGO for the thumbnail. I do appreciate that, because I am rubbish at making thumbnails, so it's I do appreciate that, thank you. But we're going to quickly go through the tiers, and then we'll get cracking with the factions. It's the same tiers as the previous video. I will go through them for regularity. The tomato scene is that's the bottom. This is the bin tier. I'm sure there'll be a couple in there. I think you'll know who. Next tier up is the Bilbo Scare tier. It's kind of like, not quite bin tier, but they have the odd spark, but most time they tend to do a bit crap. The OK tier is, well, it's mid-card, mid-tier. If he was doing wrestling terminology, it'd be the mid-card. It's factions that tend to steady. You know, sometimes they might excel, but most of the time they just sort of keep a steady line. The Boromir tier is the second off top tier. This is the sort of consistent, decent tier. The odd time they might slip up, but on the whole, they tend to be up there near the top. And the second breakfast tier, this is your Uber tier, this is your top tier. We all know who's going to be in this tier, because I can think of at least two, without even talking about them, that I know are going to be in here. This is your consistently excelled tier. Very, very rarely would you see a faction in this tier not absolutely smashing it. Someone did mention about the colours of the tiers. I think this is more like a tier maker thing, where it kind of looks like a traffic light, where it's red at the top and then amber in the middle. I mean, I don't know. It's just what they do as a standard. I don't really know much about the colours of tier makers, but the ones I've watched, it tends to be this sort of colour, so I thought I'd just leave it like that. But we're going to start with the Adunaim. The Adunaim, with the changes that AGO have made, which I think have definitely improved them as a faction. They tend to fight Mordor more now, which I think is, for that faction, is more lore accurate. I know that the Adunaim themselves aren't very... You get the point I'm trying to make. They wouldn't side with Sauron when he was the Great Deceiver, but yeah, I digress. I think the Adunaim on the whole, with the victory conditions for us as a player, it's a very long campaign. The AI tend to not do that much with the Adunaim. You sometimes see them sort of push across Harad and take a bit of Harad, but you rarely see them in the experience I've came across, which is all I can base it on. I would put the Adunaim, when controlled by the AI, in the OK tier. I don't think they're brilliant, but you rarely see them regicided anymore, which is good, because I think it is a bit of a, I don't want to say a cheat, but it's a shame that factions get regicided so easily. I think AGO's done good to sort of counter that. I think they have some odd bursts where they might push up and they might creep up towards Pelagia, but I've only seen that on one or two occasions. Most of the time, they sort of keep to their heartland regions. And if they fight Harad, they sometimes more often not lose. But for me, I think they are Adunaim. I think the OK, I think, is about as good as I can give them. We'll move on to Angmar, the Witch Realm of Angmar, or the Remnants of Angmar, what was previously known. These guys, if it was standard DAC, I would put them in second breakfast if I was just purely going off that, because you very, very rarely see Angmar slip up. They always tend to push deep towards Rivendell. They take it sometimes, I've seen it. Fornost, they do struggle taking Fornost when with the auto-resolve and Illuminas, and when they're fighting the dwarves and the Northern Dunedain and the High Elves and Bree. It's quite a lot for them, but they do spam armies quite a lot, which I do think helps. I think they have, on the whole, I think they do well. If it, like I say, if it was standard DAC, they would be in second breakfast and we would just move on. But I think again, with the change that AGO have made and the overall improvements that the mod has done, I think they've made Angmar a little bit more balanced, I think. Gives them a little bit more of a... They don't always smash it. So I think for me, I think the Boromir tier is about right for Angmar. We shall advance to the Anduin Vale. Now, the Anduin Vale, they're in a difficult position on the map. We all know that. They are sandwiched between about like 3 or 4 enemies. And most of the time, the 3 or 4 enemies tend to do a number over on them. I've seen them on the odd occasion move up towards Mount Gundabad. I've seen them take Gundabad once. They've pushed all the way down to Dol Guldur. I think that was the same campaign. They held Dol Guldur and Gundabad. But the AI with the Anduin Vale doesn't really know what to do. It sometimes takes the high pass and then just sort of sits there and waits for it to get taken. They don't really... I've rarely seen them expand past the Misty Mountains on the west. I've never really seen them push that side of the Misty Mountains. They sometimes go into Mirkwood Forest as it would be a natural sort of progression, but more often than not, you see the Anduin Vale Last Stand Army message come on your screen and you think, oh well, there we are again. It's not really a surprise. I think that's a thing to take into consideration as well, is if you see the Last Stand message frequently, then you know that the faction, when it's controlled by the AI, isn't doing as well as we would as the player. I think the previous two, I think you rarely see their Last Stand Army message come up. I think for me, the Anduin Vale, it's a difficult one, I think. And I like the Anduin Vale. I really like the Anduin Vale. I'm going to put them in the Bilbo Scare tier. I think they do enough to not be in the bottom tier, but they don't do much better. I think that's probably about as good as I can give them, I think, is the Bilbo Scare tier. Next on the agenda is the Men of Bree, Breeland. I love Bree. I think they're a fantastic faction. I think anybody that hates on Bree, I think, just play them. They're such a great faction to play as. But when the AI controls them, if they take the evil route, because AGO's changed their script now, so they can either side with Saruman or they can side with the Northern Dunedain. I think I love that. I love that script change that they did. I'm not getting paid by AGO, but I'm just talking aloud, thinking aloud. I do like Bree, but I think when the AI controls them, I think they struggle. I think they tend to do better when they go evil. I think from the experience I've seen, they don't tend to do that much really. They sometimes might push down towards Tharbad. It's very rare you see Bree take Tharbad. You see the Last Stand Army message come up quite frequently. They lose Bree quite a lot as well, and I don't think it's good when you lose your spiritual homeland region, which, you know, anyone that's played Bree, you should always move your capital away from Bree because it's always the furthest away. But we're not talking about us playing as him. For me, I think Bree, I think the Bilbo Scare tier. I love what AGO have done with Bree as a player. I think even as the AI, I think the potential that they might side with Saruman, which is what they've done on my Ered Luin campaign. I'm having to fight, I think we're on 5 enemies now or something. I've stopped caring, to be honest. I fight everybody, I'm not bothered. But I think for me, Bree are a good faction when you play as them. But I think when the AI control, I just think they struggle. They don't really know what they want to do, and their units, when the auto-resolve is just dire. So I think Bilbo Scared Tea is about as good as I can give Bree, unfortunately. Next, we've got the Kingdom of Dale. Love Dale as a faction, brilliant faction. One of my favourite factions on the game, to be honest. When controlled by the AI, they don't have the financial issues that we as the player have with Dale in the early game, because it is a difficult campaign to start off as, especially with financially. You do really have to think about where you're going to expand. The AI doesn't have that problem with Dale because the AI can't go bankrupt, so they never have that problem. In terms of their expansion, I've seen Dale sometimes take Mataram and destroy Rhun and go that way, but on the whole, they tend to do quite well. They have a nice, well-balanced roster. You very, very rarely see their last stand iMessage come up. I think I've seen it once or twice in all times I've played the Third Age Total War back in the day. So I don't think Dale are too bad on the whole. I think they do quite well. Like I said, they tend to do okay in the auto-resolve as well. They've got some nice units. They have a natural progression where you take the regions down towards Rhun, and that's the path that they tend to take. I think, yeah, Dale are a bit of a difficult one. I'm gonna, Dale. I'm going to put Dale in. They're consistent, and I think that consistency is key. I'm going to put them in the Boromir tier. They are a nice faction to play as when you play as them. The AI, yeah, I think they tend to do decent on the whole. I think they're better than they are Adunaim in terms of how they expand, and they do take the fight to Rhun, which is always nice to see. They don't just sit there and get slapped. So I like that. But I think Dale, alongside Angmar and Boromir, yeah, I'm happy with that. Now we're moving on to quite arguably one of the worst factions when controlled by the AI, and that is Dol Amroth. Dol Amroth never do anything. They are a rubbish faction when controlled by the AI. And it's so frustrating because when we play as Dol Amroth, their range and units and who they fight against, you always have that edge with the Knights of the Silver Swan unit. You always have that card that you can play. It's like, bam, nobody can outbeat that. Nobody can, in a Cav sense, you can't beat that as a general unit. People have played Dol Amroth and just used the generals and just, take Umbar with Lord Imrahil on his own. But when the AI's using Dol Amroth, they're so bad. I think the furthest I've seen them is Tir Ethred. I think that's the furthest I've ever seen Dol Amroth expand. And they'll have banner army after banner army just sitting there doing nothing. It's like, but hit Harad. Go after Harad. Hit the Adunaim. They're such an annoying faction to watch. And as an ally, they're no better. They just, you get the last stand army of Dol Amroth. I think because of how good their units are, how good their economy can become if it's done correctly, how fantastic their bodyguard is as a general, as a unit on the battlefield, and just how poorly they perform on the campaign map when controlled by the AI. For me, they've got to go into our scene. They are by far and away one of the worst factions when controlled by the AI. And it's such a shame because they do so well when you play as them. And I think that's what takes them down to that bottom tier. And it's a shame because I love Dol Amroth. They're a brilliant faction. But I can't justify putting them anything higher than that. So I'm sorry if you love Dol Amroth. I love Dol Amroth, but it pains that you put them in there, but I think they deserve it, to be honest. We're moving on to Dol Guldur. Dol Guldur, on the whole, with the changes AGO have made, I think they don't steamroll as much, which I think is good. And they do have the ability now to just go away if Mordor takes the ring, and I think I like that. It's good. I might have got that slightly mixed up, but I apologise if I have. But there is a script involving the ring with Dol Guldur, so I do apologise if I got that wrong, but I think it's right. Dol Guldur, again, if it was DAC, you'd be in the top tier because they just steamroll. Dol Guldur tend to do well. It's very rare you see Dol Guldur struggle. I think in my experiences with AGO, if Rhun is destroyed by Dorwinion, Dol Guldur will fall. It's pretty much a given because Dorwinion doesn't really know what to do, so it just marches west. And then when Dale marches west, and that's 2 decent factions you've got to fight against. They've got the spider units now, which do help in the auto-resolve. They've got the trolls, which also help in the auto-resolve. The Nazgul tend to do quite well in the auto-resolve. I'm going to put Dol Guldur. I like Dol Guldur as a faction. But for me, I'm going to put them in... I'm going to put them in the Boromir tier. If it was DAC, they'd be in the top tier. And I wouldn't even mention... I'd just put them in the top tier and just carry on. But I think Boromir tier, is probably fair, I think, for me, personally. Moving on to the Vale of Dorwinion. Brilliant faction when controlled by the player. When the AI controls them, I think it depends. It all depends on how well Rhun do, and I think that goes for a lot of them. When their natural enemy does well, they tend to struggle, but then that's war, isn't it? Really, that's just war. Dorwinion, Coruscant falls quite frequently. Their last stand army message comes up quite frequently. If you're playing as Dale, for example, or you're playing as the Dwarves of Erebor, and you take the fight to Dol Guldur, and you just have Dorwinion fight Rhun, they tend to come out on top. Not always, but on the whole, they do okay. I think for me, Dorwinion has to go in the... I think they have to go in the okay tier. I think they do enough sometimes to get by, but they're not consistently decent like the factions above them when they're with the AI. So I think okay, for the Dorwinion is about right. It's a bit of a shame because I love Dorwinion, but we have to be realistic. Now, moving on to Dunland. My favourite faction, arguably, on the game. I love Dunland as a faction. I love what AGO have done with Dunland and the way they've changed the units and things like that. Although, if you are listening and watching, the Wolf's Pike unit, I kind of preferred the older Pike unit. I'm sorry. But everything else, though, is brilliant. That's just personal preference, so it's the same as a lot of us. We prefer things like the Farmhand Pikemen. I kind of miss them being pikes, but, it's changes and we should embrace them. But for me, Dunland with what AGO have done with Isengard and the Ring script, which I think is fantastic, and they turn on Dunland struggle. If Isengard turn on Dunland, game over. No doubt about it. But I've seen campaigns now where Dunland will be up at Bree. They'll have everything from pretty much from Dunlarric up to Bree and all of Enedwaith sort of heartland regions. I've seen that happen, but then I've seen them where they've gotten destroyed straight away because Enedwaith have hit them early. I think Dunland are a bit of a difficult one. I think because they outclass Bree, which is their sort of natural enemy, because they're not really fighting. They don't tend to fight Gondor. They'll fight Enedwaith. Enedwaith's their main army. That sort of main enemy, sorry. Where them and Bree are your two sort of main enemies. I think it's a bit of a difficult one with Dunland. Try not to put the rose-tinted spectacles on. I'm going to put Dunland in... I'm going to put them in okay. I think they do decent enough on the whole. But if Isengard turns on them, they're dead. They just die. So I think okay is about fair for Dunland. Moving on to the Dwarves of Ered Luin. Very, very rarely do you see the Dwarves of Ered Luin destroyed. You rarely see them last stand army. I don't think I've ever actually seen it. I might have seen it once, maybe twice. Even if they take the rings, I think they do really well. I think if they don't take the rings, I think they do really well. Either way, they're either fighting Angmar or they're fighting the High Elves. And they tend to come out on top both occasions, really. Ered Luin are a faction for me when the AI controls them, where they just have loads of units. And it's like, where are you getting these units from? Which I do think, sometimes I question it. The Ered Luin faction, I think, I think I'm gonna put. I'm gonna put them in. I'm gonna put them in Boromir tier. I think they do well consistently. I don't think they're the top tier, but I think they do well consistently. Tend to make a lot of money, especially if you use some of the submods, like Sus, for example. If you're using that and you're not playing as Ered Luin, they still have a lot of financial benefits from the mines and whatnot. I think Boromir I think that's okay for Ered. I think that's about right. Yeah. Moving on to the clans of Enedwaith. If you watch my channel at all, I hate Enedwaith. I don't like using the word hate anymore, but I strongly dislike Enedwaith. They are my least favourite faction by a mile. Which you would think is a bit silly, really, because I like Dunland so much, but I just don't like Jav units. These really annoy me. But with the AI, Enedwaith are a machine, unfortunately. They're so annoying to fight. You can beat them easy in battle, but that's us fighting the AI. I'm just trying to focus me on how the AI does on the whole. Enedwaith, you do see their last stand army a little bit. You do see them lose Alkfud. That is quite a frequent thing, especially if Bree stays good, Dunland stays bad. Well, they can't change, but and then Isengard don't get the ring. Enedwaith, and they fight Gondor as well, which, that's quite a few enemies. But I think they hold their own. I think I've got to respect that. So I think for me, I'm going to put them in the Boromir tier. I think they do well enough, frequently enough, to warrant being alongside these. I don't think they're the top tier, because they do struggle sometimes against Dunland and Isengard and Gondor, but who wouldn't? That's three pretty powerful enemies, so I think Boromir tier is about right for Enedwaith. Moving on to the Dwarves of Erebor, Dwarves of the Iron Hills. Again, I love all the Dwarven factions. I like the lore behind the Dwarves as a whole in the Legendarium. Love it, I think they're brilliant. They're so underappreciated, and there's not as much as the other races, but when the AI control, I know we're not really talking about the books, but I think when the AI controls Erebor, they're a bit of a Erebor are a bit of a. Before I started streaming, there was a couple where I thought I'm going to struggle to rank these, and I think Erebor is the first one where I'm really sort of torn. I've seen Erebor fall quite frequently with the picture of the sort of looks like something like a dried up sort of lake type thing, like a savanna with bits of water in it. I've seen that picture quite frequently, but Erebor is attacked from the stupid invasion thing that goes on, so that's not really their fault. You rarely see Erebor take Gundabad. They might get to Berserkle, they might maybe take Dane's Halls. But when you're playing as Erebor, you as the player, you can either focus on Rhun, or you can focus on the Snow Orcs, or you could try and split and do both. There's no real sort of correct way to do it. It's how you prefer to play the game. But when the AI uses Erebor, they sometimes might get down to the Sea of Rhun, maybe, but just depends on how Dale do, and if Dale is smart enough, then Erebor tend to get a bit sort of trapped. But I think for me, on the whole, I'm going to put them in okay. I think that's about fair. They don't tend to get destroyed, but I've seen them last stand army. I've seen their capital fall, and that's not a good sign. So I think okay is about right for Erebor. We're moving on to the Goblins of Moria, or the Gobos as it's called on Discord. If this was DAC, I would put them in probably the Bilbo Scare tier. I think on DAC, they're a very bare bones faction. They don't have any, and they've got the Flame Wrangler and Trolls, and that's it. But what AGO have done, where they've changed the bodyguard to a mounted bodyguard, which I think is a really nice touch. It really works, I think, with how they play as a faction. I know the AI doesn't, I'm just talking aloud about AGO, and with the Goblins of Moria. I think the units that they've put in the game for them are very nicely done. I think the AI has recognised that a bit now. I've seen the Gobos take Imladris, Fenestruinin, Tharbad. I'm playing Harad at the minute. in my spare time on AGO, the latest version. And the Goblins have taken Tharbad, Imladris, Fenestrunin. They've gone all the way up to Anduin. I think they've taken Mount Gundabad, I think. There was one I seen him take Dane's Halls. And I was like, what? This is the Goblins of Moria. But if they lose Western Moria, that is a big loss for them financially. And you do see that happen. I think it's happening in my Ered Luin campaign at the minute. I think we're about turn 105, 110. But I know there's still a long way to go turn-wise, but gives you an idea that they don't always tend to do that well. But I think with what AGO have done and the improvements they've made, I think the Goblins of Moria tend to do quite well. When you fight them, they get annihilated because, well, the AI is just not as good as the human player. Doesn't know how to utilise their units the best. But I think the Gobos, I think they're done better. They're definitely better than what they would be if it was DAC. They'd be in the probably second off bottom tier, and that would be about all I'd have to say. But they're doing a lot better now. You see them tend to expand a bit more and a bit more intelligently as well, which I think is a big factor. I'm going to put the Goblins of Moria in... I'm going to put them in the OK tier. I would be tempted to put them in Boromir, but I think they do struggle sometimes, and I think that has to be taken into account. I think the OK tier is... Yeah, I think that's about right. We're moving on to the Kingdom of Gondor. Now, a lot of people would say put them in the tomato scene tier. But I think Gondor... They don't use their units to the best of their advantage. I think the AI struggles to really understand what to do with Gondor because it gets all the buffs at the beginning, but it still gets steamrolled by Mordor. Lore-wise, everybody knows, we all know, if you've read the books, if the events that happen in the books don't happen and nobody comes to save Gondor, everybody knows Minas Tirith had fallen. We all know that. They wouldn't have been able to have held it. I know the films do it differently to the books where they get up to a certain tier, a certain level, and then they hear him come. But in the book, the gates are broken down, and I think the book, I personally prefer the book's sort of interpretation of the Siege of Minas Tirith, where the films, for obvious reasons, tend to go, more like fighting and stuff. Where, like, if you did it in the books, it'd be like, oh, right, the gate done, right, oh, that's it. So, I get it. But this is AGO we're talking about. I just sometimes go off a tangent about Minas Tirith, and I like that chapter in the book. They do struggle. If the only time Gondor don't struggle is if you're playing as Dol Amroth or Dorwinion or Dale to a larger extent, maybe. Or if you was playing as the Adunaim, and for some reason you decided to side with the Numenor. I don't know why you would, but you decided to side with Dol Amroth and Gondor, which you could do. You wouldn't get your victory conditions, but you could do that. Gondor, and you take the fight to Mordor, obviously. Or you play as Khand, and you take the fight to Mordor. Always will win, like, but, I think Gondor, it's difficult because they're up against an absolute Goliath of an enemy. But we see Minas Tirith fall so frequently. Doskidis fall so frequently. Caer Andros falls pretty much every time. The only way Gondor can survive is if you save it and you're not even playing as them. In saying that, it's not fair. Because sometimes they do quite well. They'll push up into Enedwaith. I've seen them take, like... One time I've seen them nearly take Tharbad, and I was like, but you're losing your heartland. Surely you would fight that way, but they're probably just like, just ignoring it. Oh, it's not happening when they get their absolute arse handed to them. But I think it's a tiny bit unfair to put Gondor in the tomato scene tier, just purely because of their enemy. So I'm going to put them in the Bilbo Scare tier, but if anybody says, oh, you should have put them in the tomato scene, I totally understand why. I'm trying to sort of be a bit fair. Dol Amroth always just do crap, and they're just annoying. Where at least Gondor sometimes try, which I think, like, you get a brownie point for trying. So I think that's about right for me. I couldn't put them any higher. Yeah, I'm happy with that. We've got the Snow Orcs, the Orcs of Gundabad. Now, the Snorks, they've got some good units. We all know that. A lot of people don't like the Snorks for lore reasons, which I kind of get, but I don't personally take offense to it. I like having that sort of enemy in the north. I like that, so which isn't Angmar. Because if the Snorks weren't there, then it's kind of like, well, Angmar just, you know, I get it. They're quite a controversial faction, but I quite like them. On the whole, I think they do okay. You will see them steamroll sometimes, and they will get down to Erebor, and they'll take Erebor. They'll take, I can't remember the name of the region. Is it Kirrigathol? The Eastern Iron Hills region? I can't remember if that's off the top of my head. But I'll see them over there, and you'll think to yourself, wow. And then they'll start hitting Dale, and then they'll start, sort of going east and then down. I think that's a song, isn't it? But sometimes you will see the Last Stand Army, and you will see them destroyed. So they're a bit of an iffy one as the Snorks. But I think on the whole, I think they tend to do quite well. They're an aggressive faction as well. And there's not really many of these factions which I think you would say aren't aggressive, but Bree you would definitely say aren't very aggressive. Anduin Vale, Dol Amroth. Dol Amroth are pretty much just pointless, to be honest, when the AI controls them. They're just annoying. They're like, just die so I can take your regions. That's pretty much Dol Amroth summed up, but we're not talking about Dol Amroth. The Snorks, I think for me, they do quite well. They don't do brilliant, but they do quite well. I'm going to put them in the Boromir tier. I think they have enough about them frequently enough to not die. So I think Boromir is about right. Like I said, they do have that sort of ability to to get slapped. But they will do slapping. And I think the sort of factions below them don't tend to do too much slapping, where they tend to slap the Anduin Vale and Erebor more often than not. I think that's about fair. We've got the High Elves next. High Elves, again, they're a difficult one. A lot of these factions, I think, if we was to judge them purely, if it was just to be like an AI-only campaign, and just be like, boom, right, do the AI-only campaign, watch the video, the High Elves would very rarely do well. But this isn't how 99% of us play the game. We play the game as a faction, and we see other factions do well or do crap, and blah, blah, blah. You get the point I'm trying to make. The High Elves are a bit of a time cost one, aren't they? Like, if Ered Luin go evil and they accept the ring script, then the High Elves have pretty much lost the Grey Havens. It pretty much happens every time. But if Ered Luin stay good and they stay allied to the High Elves, or they, take the rings and then decide, oh, okay, we'll just, be friends now. I don't know why they do that for, but the High Elves tend to do quite well. You see them take the heartland of Angmar. You'll sort of see them push up towards Litash. Doesn't happen often, granted, but it will happen sometimes. You'll see them take Zagkala. You'll see them take the High Pass. You might see them fight Dunland. If they can get Osnathil, it happens sometimes. You'll get the message pop up. But you'll seldom see the Last Stand Army message for High Elves. So I think because of that. But then again, us as the player, we know how strong the High Elves are as a faction. Their units are by far the best, bar none. Like, nobody can argue with it. So anybody that argues with it, you're arguing for arguing's sake. But I think on the whole, given how we play as High Elves as a faction and how the AI does it, I think it's about fair. I can't give them any higher than that. They don't tend to do that much most of the time, and you'll just see the Imladris besieged message, and you'll sometimes see it fall, and it's like, cool. You know what I mean? So it's rarely that they'll take Osnathil, but they rarely get destroyed, which I think is a good thing. So I'm gonna put them in okay. I'm just gonna move on because I might move them down. So they're gonna stay in okay. Now we've got the Dominion of Isengard. The ring script changes that they've made for Isengard is brilliant on AGO. It works very well. Feels very lore accurate. Feels like it would if that's what happened in the story. Isengard Saruman would go against everybody and he'd be like, oh, stuff his arm, I'm just going to kill all of his. I love it. It works. Isengard very, very rarely lose to Rohan. I think I've seen it twice. Once. But how often do we see Isengard absolutely steamroll Rohan? They steamroll Lothlorien. If they turn on Dunland, they steamroll them. If they're fighting Enedwaith, they steamroll them. If they're fighting Bree, they steamroll them. If they're fighting Mordor, like the AI can hold up against Mordor and advance towards Calenhad and maybe try and hit towards Cair-Andros, especially in the late game. Isengard have got to go in the top tier. They just can't. I can't warrant them going any. I know that sometimes they might falter, but nah. Isengard are far and away one of the best AI faction controlled on AGO. I think Second Breakfast is about, I'm happy with that. Yeah. Top tier for Isengard. I'm not going to look at it again because I might change my mind. We're moving on to the Dwarves of Khazad-Dum. When we play as them, we have to do the Expedition to Moria, which some people like, some people don't. Not really a big fan of it, to be honest, but I'm not a big fan of Khazad-Dum as a faction overall. I prefer the other two, but this isn't what I prefer. But how often do we see Khazad-Dum expand? Rarely. You might see them take a Rui. You might see them take maybe Western Moria sometimes, which you think they would do straight away, but with the Balrog, it's a difficult one. I will give them that. With the mountain pass that they've introduced in AGO down the Misty Mountains, so you can get from Khazad-Dum up to the High Pass, which I think is a nice little addition. The goblins will come after them more. They have more routes to take, so it's a bit difficult for them. But on the whole, they don't tend to do that much. They tend to just sort of sit. They don't expand. So, and it's a shame because they've got some brilliant units, but I can't put them I'm going to put them in the Bilbo Scare tier. I just don't think the Dwarves of Khazad-Dum do enough that frequently to warrant them. I will give them this. No, I'm going to put them in okay. Because I'm talking myself into it. You rarely see the Last Stand army. You rarely see Eastern Moria fall. And I think you have to respect them for that. I'm going to put them in okay. I was going to put them in Bilbo Scare, but no. I think okay is about right for them. We're going to... Who are we moving on to? The Varrigs of Khand. Khand are a difficult one. They're a bit like Erebor. I'm unsure of where I would personally place them. I have nothing against... I'm not a big fan of Khand. I don't like Missile Cavs, so it's not a campaign I would personally play that much. I think if they side with Mordor, they tend to do better than if they side with Gondor. But how often do we see the Last Stand army of Khand? Frequently. I've seen them destroyed frequently. Harad, if they fight Harad, they're fucked, to be honest. They can't stand up against Harad. And then they'll fight the Adunaim, and Mordor. And if they lose to Khand, that's a big financial hub for them. I'm going to put them in the Bilbo Scare tier. I don't think they do enough, frequently enough to... No, I think that's all fair for me. We've got Mordor. Everybody knows where they're going. You're going at the top. There's no point. Like, I can't think of a time where I've ever seen Mordor actually lose unless we're playing as a faction that's fighting them. They absolutely steam. It's the Great Beasts, isn't it? If they didn't have the Great Beasts, they probably wouldn't do as well. But once they get them in their armies, the auto-resolve loves them. So they just absolutely slap everybody, and it's frustrating. But you know, I don't think I haven't really got anything else left to say. They're by far and away the best AI-controlled faction on the game. They just spam armies like crazy, but they actually expand, which is what you want them to do. So, but as an enemy, they're a pain in the arse, same as Enedwaith and Khand and Harad. They're just a pain. But if we're just talking purely on how they perform as a whole, Mordor are by far and away the best controlled faction by the AI on AGO. Can't say anything more about them, really. We'll move on to the Kingdom of Arnor, Reunited Kingdom, Northern Dunedain, Range of the North, whatever you want to call them nowadays. On the whole, they do okay. You might see them sometimes get slapped by Angmar, but then sometimes you'll see them slap Angmar. It's a shame because we all know playing as them, they've got brilliant units. But they don't really have... They don't tend to do that much, and it's like... But you could expand and just steamroll Angmar if you wanted to. But because we know how good their units are, we know how good their generals are as well. They've got a good general's bodyguard unit. They have a decent economy as well. They have some nice, unique buildings that they have. Numenas and things like that, and Tharbad and whatnot. They don't do enough for me to... You don't see them... You'll rarely see them destroyed. I don't think I've ever seen them destroyed completely. Unless I'm fighting them. You don't see the Last Stand army that much, sorry, but you don't see them take, Khazad-Dum or Litash or something like that. So I think okay, I think for the Northern Dunedain, Rangers of the North, or whatever you want to call them. I think that's about... Yeah, I think okay is about as much as I can give them, unfortunately. Moving on to the Empire of Rhun. Or just Rhun. I don't really know. I call it the Empire of Rhun. I feel like they are an Empire-type faction. Do really well for the most part. Sometimes will struggle if Dorwinion and Dale and the Dwarves of Erebor all hit them at the same time. But Rhun, for me, are a faction where if they start taking a couple of regions and they get momentum, then they're going to smash it. They're going to absolutely smash it. So I think they do well enough consistently to be a pain, but there is the odd time where they might fall and they might get the Last Stand army and Mistrin might fall or something like that. I'm going to put Rhun in the Boromir tier. I don't think they're quite top tier because they do have that ability to lose more frequently than the other two, like Isengard and Mordor, but I think they do well enough on the whole to warrant them being in that second off top tier. If you're playing AGO and you want to play the Empire of Rhun submod, which is a brilliant submod, and you play that and have the AI use them, they will do better, but I would suggest playing that as you as to play because it's a fantastic submod. I just really like that submod, to be honest. Just thought I'd mention it. We're moving on. Kingdom of Rohan. Everyone knows where these guys are going. I'm really sorry, but they're in the tomato scene. Like, there's no... I can't put them any higher than that. I think if there was a sixth tier with just Rohan in it, I'd probably put them in there. I feel sorry for Rohan because, you watch them as a faction when I watch Rohan campaigns on YouTube, like with some of the units that they've got. They're they have decent-ish units, but they're coming up against a faction which is anti-Cav on both sides. So you're either going to get slapped in the west, or you're going to get slapped in the east. And once Kyrandros falls, Mordor starts spilling into Rohan. They're knackered. They just can't do anything to stop it. I've never seen Rohan take Isengard ever. I think they might have once, maybe. They will sometimes keep Isengard at bay, but it's like it's just like delaying the inevitable. They always lose. It doesn't matter how often. How often do you see the Hornburg lost message, Edoras has fallen message, the Ride of the Rohirrim message when the Last Stand army spawns, and it's so frequent that they are by far and away one of the worst factions when controlled by the AI, which is a shame. I love the lore behind Rohan, but I can't put them any higher than... I just can't. They just have to go on the bottom tier, I'm sorry. Moving on to the Woodland Realm. Again, the Woodland Realm, they never do anything. They just sort of sit and get slapped. You see the Thranduil's Hall's besieged message quite frequently because Dol Guldur will march up by the river. They won't go to the forest, they'll go by the river and then hit it that way. Which I would get, it's probably what I would do if I was playing Dol Guldur. But the Woodland Realm, they vary. I don't think I've ever... But with the was about to say, sorry, is with the union script with Lothlorien, they stand more of a chance. But if we're rating them purely on how they are as a faction and not what they do if they merge with Lothlorien, they never do anything. The Snorks will hit them, Dol Guldur will hit them. If Rhun can somehow get up there, which I've seen in the late game happen before, they don't have anything to counter it really. They rarely expand outside of Mirkwood. I've never seen them take Dol Guldur. I'm going to put them in... I'm going to put them in the bottom tier. I'm really sorry. I know there's Woodland Realm fans out there, but I can't give them any higher than that. They have such good units and they never do anything with them, and it's like, come on, just please do something. And they're a pretty crap ally as well. They never really help you. But I do like the unit models on the campaign map. I do like them. I will give them that. I like the captain little unit you see on the campaign. I will give them that, but that doesn't save them from not being in the bottom tier. Second off last, we have Harad. I like Harad. I think they're a great faction to play as. Quite sort of primitive, if you like, in terms of technology compared to their neighbours, but when the AI controls them, they tend to do well. They tend to beat Canned more often than not. They tend to beat their Adunaim if they go to war with them, sort of, more often than not. I think they rarely get Finabel besieged. I've seen it besieged and lost a couple of times, not that often. I've seen them take all of Dol Amroth, all the regions in Dol Amroth, marching up to Pelargia and holding all of Harad and Harandor. So I think I've seen them do well more often than I haven't. I'm going to put them in the Boromir tier. I think that's about fair. I don't think they can quite go to that top tier. But the AI knows what to do with Harad, which is nice. And they are a pain to fight, which is also nice. Well, it's not nice to pain in the ass, but I think that's a sign of a good faction. So I think the Boromir tier is about right for them, to be honest. Lastly, we've got the Realm of Lothlorien. Now, we can't, again, with the Woodland Realm, they have the Union script, which means that they might merge with the Woodland Realm. But Lothlorien, they sometimes might maybe take Dol Guldur, maybe, but it's far more frequent that they'll get Khazad-Dum will be besieged, and then the last stand army will spawn. But I think because they give it a go, same as with Gondor, you get something for me for just trying, you know, and just hoping that you might actually do something. Where the Woodland Realm never does anything really. At least Lothlorien tries. I've seen them march towards Isengard with the Ent script as well. That does help. I'm gonna put them in the Bilbo Scare tier. I don't think they're good enough, often enough to be above that. I just think they struggle for some reason, and I don't really understand why, but because they can't spam out armies like the other factions can, that's why the High Elves always tend to struggle when the AI controls them. But I think Bilbo Scare tier is about right for Lothlorien. And that is it. That is all the factions of AGO, when controlled by the AI, ranked from best to worst. I'm looking at it now just before. I can't find any. I don't think there's any factions that I would move looking at them now. No, I don't think. I mean, if I was to be super critical, I'd probably be more inclined to put Gondor in the bottom tier. But I think, like I said, what I said before, I think it's about fair. Maybe could move Dorwinion up to Boromir, but then again, they don't do well that often. So, you know, I'm going to stick with it. Before I started streaming, I'd decide where people were going, and I thought, no, we're changing it. So please let me know if you agree or disagree with the decisions that I've made in this video. If you think I've put someone in the wrong tier, please let me know. Any feedback is always appreciated. We'll be having probably one more AGO tier video, I think, in terms of factions, before we sort of move away from the faction sort of tier list videos. But I quite like doing them, so, you know. But please let me know if you agree or disagree. But I would appreciate that. Any sort of feedback is always welcome. If you don't mind liking the video and maybe considering subscribing, I would appreciate that as well. It's always a nice thing to do. And I will see you guys in a future video.